Michaela.
I'm so sorry. Say that again.
Your first name is Michaela?
McKaylee.
McKaylee.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. My parents made it up, so it's always fun to introduce myself. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started then. We'll get going here. But hello, everyone. Welcome. Good evening. My name is McKaylee. I work at Tattered Cover Bookstore. And first and foremost, I want to say thank you. Thank you for supporting local independent bookstores. Thank you for shopping locally. Keeping your money in the community is a huge boon for us, more than you'll ever know. It's the reason that we've been able to survive the last year and the last 50 years at Tattered Cover Bookstore, as it is our 50th anniversary here in Denver. And we're very excited. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts to our virtual community and our in-person community, which hopefully we will be slowly but surely starting to build back up again. So we thank you all for that. For some of you who may be joining us, as this is virtual, who are outside of the Denver metro area, Tattered Cover is a local independent bookstore with currently 4 locations, soon to be 5, which is very exciting as we're opening up our children's location later this summer. So keep an eye out for that. But for now, our other stores are open. You can come in and shop around and browse the books, or you can always shop online at tatteredcover.com 24/7 there. For those also joining us for the first time, this may be your first Leaders as Readers series, which is a literary event series, which is by readers for readers. Literature has touched the lives of many in a variety of ways, and we want to celebrate the stories that have influenced us, taught us, helped us grow, challenged us, and changed us. So we're inviting local influential members of our community, like the one that we have tonight, and we want to talk to them about books and stories. We'll ask all these sorts of questions about what books they recommend everyone read at least once, what books changed their lives, and we'll go beyond the surface, dive into the magic of books, and authentically engage with the community in the best way we know how, with stories. And so we have more of these Leaders as Readers series coming up. We have Wayne Ting in the end of June, excuse me. And you can check out all of those at tatteredcover.com/event. But now I'm honored tonight to welcome our guest, Rosemary Rodriguez. Prior to founding Together We Count, Rosemary was the state director for Senator Michael Bennet of Colorado. She also served as a commissioner on the U.S. Election Assistant Commission and chaired the commission in 2008. Prior to that, Rodriguez served on Denver City Council for 3.5 years and was council president from 2005 to 2006. She also chaired the 2001 Colorado Reappointment Commission, a constitutional body that was responsible for redrawing legislative districts after the 2000 census. Rosemary is a Colorado native and attended Metropolitan State College, now Metropolitan State University, where she studied political science. And it's my honor to welcome Rosemary here this evening. I'm just changing over the camera so everybody can see you. Hello, Rosemary. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
This is such a treat to have someone who is a native and so involved with the Colorado community in a variety of different ways. And so I would love to start at the beginning of what first got you into reading. Do you remember what that first book was, or who that person was that introduced you to stories?
I actually do. Well, the first time I chose a big book for myself, I very clearly remember I was a reader. I don't know if I was an early reader or just like to read from the beginning, but in the 3rd grade for the summer reading program, which my parents always enrolled us in, I was able to select a book from the grown-up section. And I remember starting with the D's because of my height and the height of the bookshelf in front of me. And my goal was to find the biggest, thickest book I could find, because at the time I really didn't want them to end, especially if I liked the story. So the first book that I remember selecting for myself was The Pickwick Papers by Charles Dickens.
Oh my God.
And
okay, that's some adventurous reading right there. That's a big book.
It probably took me all summer, but just the day we're taping this, is actually the anniversary of his death. So
Oh,
I just happened to notice that this morning when I was, one of the first things I do when I wake up is read through Twitter posts, and that post popped up that today's the anniversary of his death. I I remember reading Dickens. I remember reading Dumas. Um, those were the kind of the thicker books, and they were very well read. Many people had read them before me, and that library is still my local branch.
oh, that's amazing. That's what I was going to ask is for you, where was one of the first places that you remember going and seeing books, and where was that place that you got to pick out your first book? Was the
Uh,
library?
the Denver Public Library Ross Barnum branch.
That's amazing. Do you have a favorite place to read that you like now?
No, I'm still partial to books as opposed to the device. And I can have the ability, I can read in a car, I can read on a bus, I can read in an airplane. I have that ability. I don't get car sick or anything, so I can read anywhere. And that's a great gift, in my
No,
opinion.
it's a huge gift. It's a huge gift. There's unfortunately some people in my life who are not that way, and
Right.
they're like, I don't travel in the same way.
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
I'm curious too about what other books, obviously after Dickens,
Hmm.
that you moved to in your life. Was there something that sparked maybe your love of political science, something that,
Hmm.
you know, really ignited that flame to help the community in the way that you do and have done?
Yeah, there were a couple of writers that I had two aunts that didn't have families or children of their own. They were my father's sisters, and one of them was pretty interested in politics. And the first book she gave me to read, because I kind of liked books about Denver, was uh, her copy of Timberline, which was about the history of the Denver Post and the Rocky Mountain News. So that instilled in me, I think, a curiosity about the news. But I remember a few books that she gave me. She gave me a book called La Raza by Stan Steiner, which was the history of the agricultural, the United Farm Workers Movement. And and then I had a sister in the sixth grade. My sister started college, and she used to bring all these books home, and that's where I learned about Dick Gregory. And I remember a book with a angry looking ape on the front called The Territorial Imperative, and I would just read anything that she brought home. Um, and then we would go to this store. It was like Target or Kmart, but the predecessor, it was called Arlen's. I don't know that it was anywhere but in North Denver, across the street from Swan Lake. But um, they used to sell uh, novels for young adults for 48 cents each. And so it had a big 48 cents on the front. And I remember if I was well behaved, I could pick up one. But I remember the day that my mom said, no, your behavior, wasn't very good this week. And I cried and cried. So I've always really loved to read, and was able to source books in a variety of places. My sister's piles, and the library, and Arlen's.
That's amazing. I'm fascinated though by your interest as a child. You said sixth grade, and your sister was bringing home these nonfiction texts. I'm
Mhm.
interested about, because sometimes you typically kids are wanting to dive into fantasy or
Yeah.
books about their own lives, but nonfiction is very fascinating. What draws you to that nonfiction rather than fiction, or
Well,
draw
I do love fiction very much, but lots of times I found nonfiction to be really stimulating. I remember Dick Gregory saying, well, it was before when only 21-year-olds could vote, and he said, if if 16-year-olds used their purchasing power and didn't buy any record albums, they could get the 16-year-old vote. I mean, and just those kinds of ideas intrigued me.
That's amazing that
It was
captivated
fun.
you
Yeah.
at such a young age. You know, I'm sitting here like reading about dragons and and here you are reading about public policy. Continuing on in your life and in your career, you know, you've obviously had such great influence and stories to tell of your own. And I'm curious about, you know, if anyone wanted to follow in your footsteps, it's a different time, but are there books you would recommend to them where they start, where they can learn about their community or how to move forward in a similar career path?
Yeah, I think a healthy dose of public policy is important, I think, in political science. But so I remember being at the Tattered cover one night when Richard Ben Kramer was there, and he wrote What It Takes, which is kind of the seminal, one of the seminal books about presidential campaigns. And it was just so cold that night. I mean, it was just bitter, 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 one of those wintry nights. And there were a few people there to hear him, of course, because I don't know if he had won the National Book Award or he had won some really
I don't
big
think it was
award.
that year, but yeah, he's
Yeah,
well.
yeah. And I asked, you know, we lined up to queue, there was queue to get it signed, and he wrote, "Thank you for spending this cold wintry night with me." And it was just as innocent as could be, but I loaned my copy to a coworker a few years later. He goes, "Wow, what kind of inscription is that?" So um, it, it, I think he was pulling my leg, but those types of really, really important books you can learn a lot from. I'm thinking of Robert Caro and the whole series about Lyndon Johnson, and Hedrick K. Smith wrote a book called The Power Game, which helped me understand why it was important to have not just the top layer of government subscribe to your ideas, but Ronald Reagan had 3 people deep in every single department, and that's how he permeated government. So just those types of ideas for someone interested in political science, they all came to me from books.
No, that's wonderful. And that's a great, that's inspiring to hear that, you know, it started there and cultivated into action. I want to shift a little bit to fiction because you said you still really enjoy fiction. What are some of your top picks that I know it's like asking to pick your favorite child, but do you have some that are just like, you have to read this before you die or something? Do you have those type of books?
I do. I really have always been fascinated by the West and the big sky and those types of stories. And I'm really excited that we're starting to have a real diversity of authors, because all of those stories are equally compelling. But so I am a huge fan of Ivan Doig. And I was thinking about which of his books would be what I call my favorite. And I think Ride With Me, Mariah Montana, and the protagonist is a newspaper man, again, the media, and he's writing a column about the 100th anniversary of Montana. He's researching by reading old letters. So the book has all these old letters in it. I think he made them up, you know, to inform his story. And then the newspaper man is writing a column. So there's prose, there's these letters, and then there's the newspaper column. And I thought, what? He was amazing, truly, truly amazing. And you know, Willa Cather and Death Comes for the Archbishop. And just these amazing stories that were really informed by the place and the sense of place. And it's something that we really cherish in Colorado. And I'm excited about both the fiction and the nonfiction that Virginia Sanchez just wrote a book about the territorial legislature, and some of the parts that were annexed from New Mexico were represented by individuals who wanted the laws to be available in Spanish because that was their language. And it's a fascinating account of their efforts, some limited success, but the Colorado Constitution was published in English, in Spanish, and in German when it was first published. And so there was some sensitivity to that, but the real struggle that these legislators went through to not only get the code that was going to govern these new citizens of the state available, but the money to make copies to make available. It's complicated.
I need to add that book to my list. This sounds amazing. Wow. There's been, just talking about the big sky in Montana and, the history of the West and how it's being told from all these perspectives. There's actually a really nice wave of stories coming from a wide variety of perspectives nowadays that are being published. And so I've found a renewed love of that as well. So I'm glad to have another one to add to my list. Thank you, Miss Rosemary. I appreciate it. I want to ask too about what reading does for you, and what value books and stories bring to your life.
I think it encourages the imagination. You look for when I travel, I try to choose a book that's about the place that I'm visiting, or you try to, you come across a place like Leadville, and you think of Wallace Stegner and Angle of Repose. It can just liven up your day-to-day life. And when I say travel, I don't mean across the world, but it can be, Colorado Springs. But I always think of Helen Hunt Jackson and her family who made Colorado Springs their home. Ramona was one of my favorite books. And she was a real advocate for fair treatment of American Indians. And just thinking about that when you're in those spaces that relate to her can really make life more interesting and encourage curiosity.
Yeah, absolutely. It provides a window into other worlds and inspires you to learn more, as you were talking about. I'm curious too, when was the first time you saw yourself in a book, in a story, either as a woman of color? Where did you first see yourself, and how did that influence your life?
Well, I always did kind of look for those, but there were not a lot available as a young person. I remember as an adult talking to a friend about about Jane Austen and how much I loved the books, and she said, "How can you relate to them?" And I related to them because my father had a bunch of daughters, and while we weren't, in the cultural situation, I could relate to it.
Yeah. When you've got sisters, you can relate.
Exactly. And So one of the books that I did relate to, I didn't relate to in day-to-day life, but I was A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, which again, I had nothing in common with the Irish, upbringing, but I was Catholic. She used to go to the library all the time. They weren't wealthy people. Uh, Fortunately, I had a lot more stability at home than she had, but and I can't think of her name right now, but the you know there were themes that I could relate to. Now I do make it a point to try to keep up with Latino literature. And at one point I started a little book club, and we would read a book by a Chicano, someone from the Southwest, and then we would read a book by someone, a Latin American or a Cuban, Caribbean, or something. So we had quite an interesting book club. And then when an author was in town, we'd go see them. And we had dinner with Oscar Ubelos, and we had Isabel. Yeah. I would call Margaret Maupin at the bookstore, and
Yeah.
she would say, well, the person driving them that day is this person. And she would connect us. And of course they wanted to go to dinner with a bunch of book lovers.
Yes.
And so Julia Alvarez did a slide presentation at, I can't remember the venue, but we were invited, and it was about the butterflies, the Mirabal sisters. So I just couldn't, I had a lot of responsibility at work, and I just couldn't keep it all organized. But we had some fantastic conversations with people, Rudy and Naya. I mean, people we really, really admired.
Okay, so I'm gonna deviate for a hot second as I'm fangirling over here in the corner, which, I love books and authors, and that's why I do what I do. Do you have any stories or fun memories that from those times of either meeting those authors or in your book club that you can share with us?
Well, Luis Urea, we became very good friends with Luis. It was after he had already moved to Illinois. I think he got a teaching job there. And he gave us the whole plot of the book he wrote about his aunt, who was, oh gosh, I can't think of the name of it, but she had powers, some kind of mystical powers. And she was kind of kept away from people because everybody wanted her to bless them. And he told us the whole plot. He was in a big controversy with another writer who wanted to write her story, but Teresita, she was his family, and his family wanted him to write the story. And we were just like, oh my God, you could write a book about this.
About the controversy, yeah.
Exactly.
You got a nice sneak peek.
He was wonderful. We're still friends.
Oh, how amazing. That's what, oh, man, that's so, again, sorry,
cool.
I apologize for the fangirling over here, but that's amazing. What great history and what stories that you have to tell as well. And I think that book club is that was an amazing idea. And the fact that, life happens and you weren't able to continue it. Were there any titles that really stick out to you? You've mentioned wonderful authors on the list as well, but any titles from that time during the book club that you have to mention?
Well, we had, we met Oscar right after when Mambo Kings had been made into a film. We hadn't seen it yet, but of course he's gone now, which is so sad. But that was pretty amazing. And he talked about the casting and that kind of thing.
Movie process is fun. From
Yeah. Yeah. And then learning about from Julia Alvarez about the translation and how important it was for her to to be translated by someone who spoke Spanish in a way that her Dominican community could understand. She said you can't have someone from Spain translate because in the Dominican the idiom is different. So it's
No, that's all right.
well,
I'm
no,
already, like I said, it's a treat hearing all of these stories, and that, maybe with this list we can resurrect some memory of the book club and be like, at least they read these, and I want to
yeah,
reassure our audiences too that after this interview we are going to be compiling a list of the books that Rosemary and I discussed this evening, and compile that list and be linking it to the video and on our website so that you can check out all the books that Rosemary is recommending this evening. Speaking of which, this is one of my favorite questions. What's on your nightstand right now? What are you reading right now?
Well, there's a couple of books right now. I'm reading one about the post-pandemic, about how we might use the pandemic to unleash a lot of creativity. I think the opportunities can be very exciting, and I will get you the author's name because it's a slim book, and I think people would find it stimulating.
Thank you. I'll appreciate that afterwards. We'll make sure we add it to our list. No worries.
Yeah. And then Steve Inskeep's book about Fremont, and he mapped some of the major rivers in the West. Pikes Peak he mapped, and became a very Fremont became we have Fremont County named after him, and he became governor of Arizona. He seized California for the United States. I mean, he was a little bit nutty, I think, but just
a lot of bit nutty.
But his father-in-law was a United States Senator for the state of Missouri, and had a really important relationship with Mexico because of the Santa Fe Trail going into St. Louis. And so he had a lot of value on his father-in-law, Senator Benton, spoke Spanish because he read newspapers from Mexico because he needed to keep up. And it's just fascinating how international trade was well before we had easy routes. He talks about Fremont loving coffee, and they lost a barge, a bale of coffee on one of his expeditions. And so they met an Indian trader who they bought coffee from. And he pauses in the story and he says, think about that. Where did he get the coffee? And what process of trade did this trader end up with coffee to sell? And it was international trade, and it was happening. And it's just the way that we developed as a West.
Wow. Miss Rosemary, you're such a good storyteller in the way that you relay these back, and I'm enjoying listening to your recommendations. And trust me, I do this a lot. But is a book something that you write, or your stories anywhere in your future, do you think?
Well, I do think about it. I think I'd rather read than write right now, but it definitely, I do have a few stories that I could tell, that I could protect the innocent. My problem is, I'd just rather be reading than writing.
That is completely understandable. That's what this series is for readers by readers, and it's completely understandable. I really only wanted to ask because, like I said, you're so engaging and enigmatic when you tell these stories. And so the last question I want to ask is an open-ended one, in that what have you learned from books? What have books taught you in your life that you want to share with us now?
Well, I think the arc of a story is one way to think about the lives we live. Um, we, you
Yes.
know, we had our beginning. We're at some point, um, and and what kind of story do we want people to think of when they think of us? And that's kind of kept me, you know, responsible uh, for things. But but we have we have a say in it, and we don't have to be um, subject to the whims, but there are things that are within our control, and how do you want to be remembered, I guess.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. Rosemary Rodriguez, it's been an honor over the last 30 minutes to speak with you, to talk books and stories with you. Um, like I said, I feel the need to like take you out for coffee and enjoy more stories about this book club where you just met all these amazing authors. But I want to give you a chance to remind people who you are, where they can find you online, and mention any other books that you just have to say before we close out this evening.
Sure. So I retired now, but I still have a website for a few months, togetherwecount.org, for the project that I started. I'm still involved, so if you ever Googled me, I'm sure something would come up about me trying to remind people of something or do something. Um, the book I would love to leave you with is Stuart Udall's book, To the Inland Empire. And he writes the history of the exploration of the US from the West, and he goes east. And that was very important to him that if you've ever visited the Black Canyon of the Gunnison, there are maps in this book of that, and stories of how the explorers came north from Mexico to map the wild West. And it's a wonderful book. I don't know if it's in print, but if you swore an oath to return my copy, I do have one copy.
Okay. We will, if it is in print, we'll put it on our list. We have
Okay.
Rosemary Rodriguez's reading list that we're going to put on our website and link alongside this video, which you can click in the description below once we post this. And Rosemary, thank you so much. And I want to let you know, because this video will close when I just end it here. But there is the Colorado Sun put together a wonderful book list called the 50 Books of the West.
I saw it.
You did? Okay, good. And anybody who's reading who's similar to Rosemary in her tastes of West and big sky and kind of that American dream, the Colorado Sun did a great job of putting together this list of books and asking members of the Colorado community for recommendations. And I have no doubt now that Rosemary's books are now added to my books that were from that list, and just it never ends, does it? So, well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you. Yes, stacks and stacks. Thank you so much for your evening, Rosemary. We really appreciate it. And thank you to everybody watching. Depending on what time it is right now, you might be searching for dinner, or if you're watching this at a different time, maybe think about supporting a local mom and pop restaurant, someone who's been in the Denver area for a while. We as small businesses would not be here without you, and we thank you so much for your continued support over the years. I'm McKaylee, and this has been Readers as Leaders with Rosemary Rodriguez. You can check out her full list of books in the description below. Thank you all again, and stay safe. Happy reading, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night, Rosemary.
Good night.